Welcome to Follow Your Curiosity. Ordinary people, extraordinary creativity. Here's how to get unstuck. I'm your host, creativity coach Nancy Norbeck. Let's go. Elle Jaye supports powerful and resilient working moms who want to put an end to the power struggles with their child so they become a strong team instead of adversaries. The working moms realize they are women first, and mothering is another job they do. By disrupting this mindset, the women step into their power and resilience as an extension of their values and intent for their children. Elle joins me to talk about how she discovered her creative side in her 20s, how we normalize and pass on relationship and parenting patterns, how we can see adults as atrophied children rather than seeing children as mini adults, and more. I think you'll find a lot of food for thought in my conversation with Elle Jaye. Elle, welcome to Follow Your Curiosity.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I really appreciate being here.
So I start everybody with the same question. Were you a creative kid, or did you discover your creative side later on?
I discovered my creative side later on.
So what did that look like for you?
I was an adult. Because as I grew up, creativity wasn't applauded or sought after. It was your brain, logic, science. That's where I was habituated, conditioned into thinking and things like that. And we definitely listened to music, watched movies, different things like that. But as far as me being the creative one, I don't think it would have gone over very well.
Were you aware of that as a kid, or did it just seem normal to you?
It was normal the way that we were habituated, like the science and the thinking and things like that. That was normal.
So then what happened when you started to discover that you had a creative piece of yourself?
Well, I think that came with having children and being able to think about things in a different way. And then even to say, even though we were not, I wasn't artsy or anything like that. And I would tell myself, I can't draw. Like, why would I say that to myself? But hey, that's what we say. And then I don't even know. Like, it's a wonderful question because you're making me think right now.
If you don't mind me asking, just because I'm terribly curious. So how old were you when this happened? Roughly, if that's easier.
Yeah, it would have to be a roughly. I think I would say it was the late 20s into 30s.
Because it seems like that would be quite a shock.
Well, it wasn't Nancy, the thing you get to know about me is I underestimate a lot of emotions and different things. So I hadn't put much stock into some things. And then like some life challenges happened. And then I got really into the emotions because I was like, what are these? Kind of like creativity, like what is this that's happening? And recognizing I've had creativity all along with being able to problem solve and find different ways to do things. And just the way I would ponder and think about stuff and just try to be curious. The thing with my curiosity, though, is growing up, asking questions was, like treason or something because you were challenging your parent. I was challenging my parents. That's how they saw it. But I was really just a curious person and wanted to understand how things worked.
That's so interesting because curiosity is so fundamental to so much science and logic and all of that, that you would think that that part would have been okay.
You would think.
That's the key phrase, isn't it?
Yeah. So you would think it would, but when you're dealing with, as a parent myself now, right? And looking back and putting myself in my parents' shoes, what my parents decided to do was have a large family. Okay. My mom had over 8 children. Okay. Wow. So as an adult, if you have that many children coming with their curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a busy day and you're just the one person, or sometimes you find a way to shut questions down.
That's a lot. Yeah. So it's not so much I'm anti-curiosity as I'm desperate to preserve my sanity.
Yes. Yeah. I believe that is how I would say that it happened for my parents.
Yeah. So what happened when you suddenly realized, hey, there is this deeply curious piece of me that has always been interested in problem solving, and maybe I am interested in trying to draw something, or, you know, playing the music instead of just listening to it, or however that came up. What came along with that for you?
What came along was the ability to color, just pulling out a coloring book, map colors, and just saying, I just want to escape into creating this picture in a way that works for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's what I did. That was my way of, I guess, escape. I don't know, escape may not be the right word, but relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's mindless from the standpoint of like the thinking that I would do, the problem solving that I would do, to just being able to just put colors on a page.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of like, I've used this half of my brain, even though I know that that whole left side, right side thing is not quite so in vogue anymore. But for the sake of argument, I've used this half of my brain for years. And now I want to switch it off a little bit and play with the other side. Because now I realize I have the other side.
Yes. It is a definite thing.
So since this happened around the time you had kids, did that turn into something that you did with your kids?
I did it around them. And the thing that was interesting is both of my children love math. And they are on the creative side. I didn't, that was foreign to me. Mm-hmm. And with that being as foreign as it was, it was hard to kind of relate to them because they were doing things that was not exactly my strength or my forte. And I was like, well, the best I could do, pencil, paper, here we go. Because one of them loves to build, like bought the magnets and she created such lavish structures that stood. And I'm like, you're getting this thing to stand? And it wasn't, it was like, a foot and a half off the ground with these magnets that she was using to build with. And I'm just like, oh, this is amazing. And it wasn't just square. It was hexagons and almost dodecahedrons and everything else. And I'm like, whoa. But that's what she was doing.
It's amazing when you watch kids do things and you're just going, I didn't know about that as a kid, and it's mystifying to me, but also so cool. Like, I'm in awe and I'm jealous all at the same time.
Right. And it's like, you get it from me somewhere. And what I found out was my mother's dad. Um, he was really good at math, but in being like a sharecropper, he didn't have like a formal education. And my uncle was sharing with me how he was able to cut their house, the house that he built, he was able to cut it in half and move it and put it back together again. And I'm sitting here like, what? And he
Yeah,
was
that's
like,
what I'm thinking.
yeah. And and he said that my grandfather didn't know how to read, but my grandmother did. So she would read what needed to be read, and they worked it together, and they were able to transport their home.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah,
I think the cutting it in half part is even more mind blowing to me than the picking it up and moving it part.
right.
I've heard of that part before. The cutting it in half, though, is a whole other level.
Yes. And mind you, I don't have full context because the time in which this was done, um, of course, I wasn't living, you know,
Right.
and again, they, as sharecroppers and different things like that, there's so many aspects of that part of their lives that I don't have context for. But to hear it, um, it was like, man, I really wish I would have known him more, but he passed, I think, when I was like 8 years old.
Wow. Yeah, the questions that you wish you could have asked as an adult that you didn't know to ask when you were 8, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'm
Yes.
I'm going to be thinking about cutting houses in half for a while now.
Right.
So where did you go from I'm going to, color for a while?
Well, from there, I just started going into looking at the different movies that we watched growing up, and even some that were off limits because of the rating.
Mhm.
But I would hear my parents watch them or whatever. And what I did from there was what my dad would do is he would like allow us to watch a movie, and then if there was a life lesson, he would pause the movie and give us the life lesson. So I continued that aspect. And I know that may not be as creative, but to me it is, because not only did I do that with the movie I was watching, I would tie it into other aspects of life to be able to dig deeper, go deeper, and have that curiosity to tie it to something else and relate it to something else.
That's so interesting because I was an English lit major,
Mhm.
and it strikes me as being so similar to what you do in an English lit class. You take that book and you're connecting it to so many other things and kind of sort of pulling it apart and putting it back together again and seeing what all you can find in it in history and philosophy and in your own life. And so it strikes me, I'd imagine if you majored in film studies, that's what you would do there too. So it seems like that's probably a very film studies sort of thing that you were doing. Are there particular connections that you came up with that stick with you?
Um, a lot of the connections is relational. It's just how people relate to each other. And um, for example, my dad loved Andy Griffith. Okay. Loved the show. I can always hear the whistling theme song, of which I can't
Mm-hmm.
whistle, right? So I started watching it, and I'm looking at the show that everybody is applauding, and it's like, oh, this is wholesome TV. No, it's not.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
No, it's not. And I know someone would probably want to cancel me for saying that because it is so much a part of what they had when they were growing up. Because, selections were limited.
Mm-hmm.
And I honor that and I respect that. Okay. And I want to be able to say that now that I'm an adult, looking back on that funny comedy sitcom, okay, which is what that was, that show rewarded a man who lied and manipulated people and then would say it was for their benefit. And the reason that sticks out for me is because that's what I was told. We're doing this for your benefit. But it seemed that parents were very manipulative in not like a malicious kind of way, but like in the way of like what I was saying earlier. In order to cut down and save their sanity, they cut off the questions, right? So, and that was for their benefit and what they had the capacity to handle at the time, right? So that's the same thing that I'm seeing with the Andy Griffith show, is that they were doing that same thing. He was like, so for Barney, he was inept, but he was also his cousin.
Right.
And in order for Barney not to know how ignorant, unlearned he was, Andy would just let some stuff slide. And fast forward, we've got people still doing things like that to this day. And Floyd, the barber, he would say, Andy, I'm glad you're on my side. Because, he actually said it in one of the earlier episodes that Andy was so, like, he was lying and cunning and different things like that. I'm like, he used the words. So to describe the sheriff of the town.
Wow. It's been a long time since I've watched Andy Griffith, I can tell you. I'm realizing as you're telling me this.
And so as I watched, mind you, I was watching it during a time where manipulation was prevalent in my life. And because that was a area that I was healing, it was noticeable.
It's
when
flashing.
Yes, whenever it was done, it was noticeable. So I'm sitting here watching this show after my dad passed away.
Oh.
Okay.
What timing?
And I'm like, oh, this is why you behave this way, because you grew up thinking that it was okay.
Yes. This is reminding me of a couple of conversations that I've had with my mom in the last couple of years. And, about that same kind of generational difference, like that her generation was not raised with any real kind of emotional awareness because, she's a baby boomer. She's an early baby boomer, So back then, it was that whole thing where, good Lord, if you talked about an emotion, there might be something wrong with you and you might have to go see somebody about that. And that meant there was something really wrong with you. And so you weren't going to talk about that at all, which meant that entire generation has no vocabulary to talk about how they feel about things. So when those emotions come up and bubble over and something's wrong, they have no good way to deal with it. So
No.
it comes out in ways that are not helpful, that make problems worse unless they're super lucky and stumble by accident onto a good way of saying something. And it's not their fault. They don't know any better. I
They
mean,
don't.
you can argue that they've had however many years to go fix this, but fundamentally they were not originally taught any better.
Right.
So there's kind of both of those pieces here. And I mean, I'm Gen X, so I wasn't really raised a whole lot better. It's just that my generation figured out, hey, we can go do something about this. And
Right.
some of us have done that, some of us haven't. And then, we hope that with the millennials and the Gen Zs and everything, that it's starting to become more and more normalized. Because when you have the words and the understanding and the awareness to actually have a mature, rational conversation about what's going on, good Lord, imagine it goes better.
It goes way better.
It goes way better.
And it is because a lot of times, Nancy, what happens is there's lots of blame, shame, and guilt provoking vocabulary that goes around.
Right.
Instead of an understanding that this is how this generation was habituated.
Right.
And leave the judgment to the side. And by leaving the judgment to the side, we get to share with them ways of meeting them where they are, right? The unfortunate thing for me is both of my parents are gone. They're deceased. And at the time, there was no meeting them where they were. They created me, and I learned through observation and through their teaching how to be in this world, right? Then became an adult myself and was stumbling along, trying to figure it out, discovering and naming things that were not named when I was younger. Because you are correct, when it came to emotions, what I was habituated to was there's laughter, and happiness and just being. And then there's anger and sadness, but that was only reserved for the adults.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. And I wouldn't have been surprised if you'd said that it was reserved for your dad.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the time.
Yeah. My mom could cry, but she couldn't be angry in front of my dad. She could be angry with us without my dad present, but those were dad emotions. And crying definitely was off the table when it came to my dad's. Like, why are you crying?
Yeah. And I'll bet you if you went back and watched Andy Griffith, that's what you would see on there, because that's how it was normalized, right? It was what everybody thought was normal. So it went on to the show, and then it was renormalized through the show. And so everybody grew up and thought, well, this is just how people get along.
And you can see how the arts and the creative genres can impact a person's real life. Like even the books that we read. I love Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. Ramona, all of those, Babysitter's Club. And then I love Wuthering Heights. Just love it. And then I do like Shakespeare as well. Kenneth Branagh, really, I was like, dude, where were you when I was in high school? So, because actually it was when I was in high school that we had an assignment to watch Much Ado About Nothing. And that became my favoritist.
Oh, yeah.
And it was also quite helpful that there were people in it that, like Keanu Reeves, Denzel Washington. Who else? Those were the main two that I remember that had like notoriety,
Mm-hmm.
um, at the time that movie came out. So I was like, oh, these people are in it. Cool.
Yeah.
And it was an assignment to watch while I was in high school, and I loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it. And the way he talked, I just loved it. So yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a huge Shakespeare nerd myself. So, though I have to say, as much as it makes me feel like a heretic, and I still love that version, but if you get the chance to see The Much Ado with David Tennant and Catherine Tate, I cannot recommend it enough. So, just a little tip for anybody else who hasn't seen that one. It's fantastic. The physical comedy is just unbelievable. So yeah, but like all of that stuff, it's funny because there's a show that I have watched on Netflix, and I don't think it's on there anymore, that it was a Hallmark show. So it's not like great cinema or anything, but it was called The Good Witch. And one of the things that I really liked about it was that it showed a really healthy, respectful adult relationship. There was plenty of drama, but it was drama like with the nosy mayor in town, or, some other situation with the people who were coming to stay at the B&B that they owned or whatever. It was not interpersonal, we're fighting all the time kind of stuff. Like they might have a disagreement about something, but they handled it like mature adults. And I thought, I don't think I've ever seen a TV show. Now, in my defense, I haven't watched a whole lot of TV in years, and especially network TV, so I can't speak to what's been out there. But I was just like, wow, this is like what a relationship really should ideally work like. And it's not perfect, but it's getting there. Like, wow, it can work like this. And so that was really kind of enlightening and encouraging for me. Like, okay, it doesn't have to be people, getting upset with each other and not wanting to talk about it and being stubborn. And I'm going to pretend everything's okay. All of the usual things that build drama in our lives and generally on TV. And I was like, wow, look at that. People can actually communicate in a way that is sane.
Right.
Huh.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Yeah. Go figure. And with that, the more I'm sitting here talking to you about this creativity, I think creativity's been like the arts have been in my life longer than what I gave it credit, because watching movies and TV shows as a family was a connection point. To where that was the way that art was allowed. And then if we had like a school project, okay.
Okay.
But it wasn't this, it was almost like an understanding that to be artsy, musically inclined kind of thing was only accepted as an escape, but not as a way to bring money into your home. So I think that would be a way that I can describe how it was. Because again, we watched a lot, and as you were talking about The Good Witch, what came to mind for me was the Cosby Show from the 80s, because the conflict wasn't between the parents. It was between the parents and the children and all of the different situations that arose there. And that was beneficial to me because by seeing a family that looked like mine have a successful woman working outside the home, because that's not where my mom worked inside the home with as many children as we had. And then the dad also working outside the home, but yet he was just down in the basement. So He was more at home than the mom. Like, if
Mm-hmm.
you really think about it, he was really and truly there closer to home, and able to deal with some of the day-to-day things than the mom was. And I was like, man, that is something I'd love to be able to have, to be able to work outside the home where both adults, parents are successful. They have their own lives where they can travel and leave the kids where, where they are, kind of thing sometimes. And there's grandparents that can help take care of them. So I was like, oh, I'd like that. That is not what happened in my life, but it was good to see that vision of something that is possible. And
Yeah.
that is the beauty of art. It shows you what's possible. And even with the drawn art, for somebody, it may look like scribbles, but for someone else, it can evoke calm.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about the Cosby Show, what immediately popped into my head was when there was a conflict between the parents and the kids, they would call a family meeting and have a rational conversation, or mostly rational, at least, conversation about it. And I remember watching that going, wow,
That's possible.
that's possible? Really? You could do that? That whole concept was just totally mind-blowing to me.
And what made it so mind-blowing to you also?
I had never seen anything like that in a family. Never seen anything like that. It was always mom and dad were basically the dictators in the little family fiefdom. And if you screwed up, their decision was swift, and probably kind of punitive to whatever degree they dictated in that moment based on how angry they were was necessary. You may or may not have gotten much of a say in your own defense. And you were, banished to your room with or without dinner, with or without whatever privileges they decided you weren't going to have for whatever period of time. And you basically went off and, sulked for whatever period of time and, felt the requisite level of shame and embarrassment and all of that. And that was the appropriate response to the situation. So the idea that it did not have to be that way is just like, I'm sure that some of those family meetings still resulted in some guilt and shame and grounding and whatever, because it's been a long time since I've seen that show. But with at least some understanding and some discussion about why that was the decision that was being made and, all of that, rather than handed down by fiat because dad's angry today.
Right.
Yeah.
And as you talk about that, it's the similar situation for my experience as well, which is if you made a mistake, you were branded by that mistake, and seen as like not trustworthy. There was no making it up kind of thing. And there had to be some sort of show of contrition and things like that. And, I'm just like, all of that. And then you become an adult and it can stay with you. And then you can also do the same thing to your children.
Because it's
not
all you know.
Yeah, not knowing that, hey, that mess was not healthy. Because I've heard so many parents say, look at me, I turned out fine.
Oh, man, I have heard that so many times. And I'm like, every time I hear that, I'm like, no, you didn't. And I know you didn't because you just said that.
So much hiding.
Yeah.
About like all of that. There's just so much hiding.
And the people who say that the most are the ones who were spanked as kids. I was hit and I'm fine. No, you're not.
No, you're not. There's some things you haven't addressed from those consequences. And a lot of people will say, well, the Bible said,
Oh, Lord.
spare the rod, spoil the child. Okay, so there is truth to consequences for behaviors, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's always some sort of consequence. And when you balance that scripture with another scripture that tells parents not to provoke your child.
See, they don't want to remember that one.
No, they don't. They don't. And but the wonderful thing is, my mother, what we would do is we would have what we would call prayer every night when my dad wasn't home. And she would read that scripture that said, because it starts, children, obey your parents in the Lord, because this is right. And it's the first commandment with promise. And then it went into, parents, don't provoke your children to wrath. And she would read it all. And now that I'm an adult, I'm like, thank you, because she didn't cherry pick.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't cherry pick for her own benefit, and I'm just not a fan when people misuse scripture, literature out of context, in order to make a point, in a way that is damaging to another human, and taking away their free will, taking away their identity. That's like, no, that's the last thing you want to do to a person. And yeah, so the whole punishment, punitive, no, that's just not how we get to do that. We can shift and we can change.
Yeah, there are so many better ways to do things. And, I think, now I'm trying to remember the quote. There's the idea that, I'm going to screw this up. There are some people who view children as mini adults, which
Mm-hmm.
isn't really accurate, as we know. Right.
Right.
There's so much going on inside that little brain, and it's
Mm-hmm.
pulling in so much information. It's like a sponge it's absorbing everything while it's building itself.
Mm-hmm.
So you gotta, kind of be careful what all you put in there, whether it's capable of handling it while
Mm-hmm.
it's building itself. Right. So the idea that children are just mini adults and should be treated like adults is not correct. But there's a guy named Keith Johnstone who was a theater kind of, what's the right word for him? He wrote a book in the 70s called
Mm-hmm.
Impro that was sort of like the Bible of improv.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it, he talks about unlearning all of the things that you've been taught because they keep you from doing improv well. So it's a great book on creativity. But he talks about how instead of thinking that, children are mini adults, that adults are atrophied children. And so, we've lost the abilities that we were born with because we've been trained and taught out of them. And so, that's why you have to, when you go to an improv class, you have to learn to get out of your own way in order to
Mm-hmm.
improv well, to improvise well.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like we think of all of these things in this backwards way.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we expect kids to be more mature than they are. And we think that we're, more mature than I think a lot of times we actually are. And We come up with these combinations, whereas, like, if a kid screws up, they're capable of understanding that they screwed up if you are capable of explaining it to them in terms that they understand. Like, it's, if you treat a kid like they should know better when they have no way to know better, you're going to consistently be disappointed. But if you remember that a kid is not actually a mini adult, but that you can get down on their level, and that actually you were once a kid too, and you're actually an atrophied child yourself, then, again, it's that vocabulary and the communication level. I've seen my brother and my sister-in-law do this with my nephews when they were smaller. And I remember just watching them, like, the kid's 3 and you're out pruning the trees and they pick up the pruning shears. And, obviously you don't want the 3-year-old to have the pruning shears for reasons you don't need to explain to yourself. But when you take the pruning shears from the 3-year-old and they start to bawl their brains out, you need to explain it to the 3-year-old. And it doesn't have to be complicated, right? It can just be, I know, I'm sorry you're upset, but these are really, really dangerous, and I need to make sure you don't hurt yourself. Yes. And we'll get you something else that you can play with. And when you're old enough, you can use the pruning shears. It doesn't have to be a dissertation because the kid's 3, but you can explain it in terms that they can understand, so that it's not just, you took the thing from me and maybe I was bad and now I'm very upset.
Right. And I like that example because when we think back to growing up with the parents that we were blessed to have, that generation has a tendency to talk at you and say, you know better. What's wrong with you? I told you already, and why don't you remember? You don't have this and you don't have that. I mean, it's like, no wonder so many people have a hard time accomplishing things, because the people who brought them in this world spoke down so negatively to them and created wounds, which is trauma, which created wounds in these children who became the atrophied adults, who repeated patterns because that's what they saw. And they have, they continue that pattern from generation to generation, unless somebody says, nope, I'm done. And I'm going to do the work to stop thinking that way, being that way, and do something different with my own children or my own family, because I'm tired of that. And that is actually something that I myself have done. And it's a definite challenge to do something like that. And so I love how you said, Keith, John Stone.
Yep.
Okay. I actually wrote his name down. Because I want to find that quote about the atrophied adults, because my children, this is hilarious. My child is talking to me about what they have experienced in seeing between me and their dad. And they said, y'all need to stop behaving like children. And it's like, do you not even understand that you just insulted yourself with that statement? But at the same time, Keith, Johnstone is correct. Adults are atrophied children.
Yeah.
And when I was a child, I was like, man, I almost had like a Peter Pan syndrome. I'm not going to grow up. I'm going to always remember what it's like to be a child, because I don't want my children I don't want to be so disconnected from being a child that I treat my children the way my parents treated me.
Yeah. That's like such a teenage thing, right?
Yeah, I think I was probably younger than that. And with that thinking, the issue is I don't have context about what it means to be an adult.
Right.
When I make that statement. And then when you become an adult, there's a reason why some of those childish ways have to be put to the side. One, your brain is actually developing into some higher functioning, and the responsibilities and the ability to manage and have the capacity to deal with challenges and have fun. A lot of people are like, I don't have mental capacity for both of these things.
Mm-hmm.
So which one goes to the wayside? The fun. Because we've got to be able to protect ourselves financially, emotionally, socially. Then we're bringing additional lives into this world. And that's another layer of responsibility. And you think control, but you don't control those those living beings that come out of your body. You're in charge of them, but you don't control them. And for somebody to tell me that there was a difference, and thank goodness for ChatGPT, I did even further diving into that. And it's like, oh, these dots are connecting because I was a controller. I wanted to control my children because that's what was done to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I feel like I'm like jumping around here in this conversation, but it all ties together in that as adults, because of the way we were raised as children, that impacts how we become adults.
Yes.
And we're like, okay, well, we see our parents aren't having fun.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's what I can do when I become an adult. I can't have fun anymore, which is why there's a Peter Pan.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to grow up. I don't want to be this adult who cannot play, who cannot laugh, who cannot just have fun because there's so much going on.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I watched Hook, the Dustin Hoffman, Robin Williams version. Okay. And I was thinking about it the other day where Pan, the adult Pan, was sword fighting with Captain Hook. And he said, I remember you being a lot taller than this. And then Captain Hook was like, to a 10-year-old, I'm huge.
Yeah.
So it really is about perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So when we grow up and we revisit a thing that like Peter Pan fought Hook when he was a child.
Yeah.
Now fast forward, he's an adult and Captain Hook's an adult and he's fighting him. And he's like, in his mind, he's like, you were so much bigger. And which means he kept him big in his head.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he was also now big, he kept Captain Hook at probably that same proportion in his mind, to where it robbed Pan of recognizing his power and learning from how he experienced Captain Hook. And in doing that, it robbed him of his resilience and his power. But once you're able to revisit and fight and deal with a thing, then you are able to say, hey, it's not as bad as what I think or what I thought. And that's where creativity helps adults.
Yeah.
Because it helps you be able to put things into a perspective that you didn't think was there before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And example from my own life, my daughters were going at it this past weekend. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this sounds like, who is that in the kitchen? Is that me? It's like, wait a minute, I'm upstairs. And so I was like, oh shit. I taught, like, my children learned that behavior from me. And so I got to learn, like, the result, the outcome of my way of being and how they picked it up. And so I was able to come downstairs and calmly, not raise my voice to match theirs, because then they would be like, oh, well, you're still the same yelling person. But I didn't. And I was like, hey, let's leave this space and go to a different space and have a conversation and things like that. And then in order for them to connect the dots to what I was talking about, we watched this show, Modern Family.
Mm-hmm.
And in that show, one of the mothers, she's a type A personality, and her husband is not. Okay. He's more, I don't know what the opposite of that is. But anyway, so anytime he's telling a story and he's being long-winded, she'll go bloop, bloop, in order to make him fast forward and get to the point.
Oof.
Yeah. Isn't that rude? That's like, well, they have children. And so her oldest daughter, when she started dating, got to that age to date a guy, the guy that she was dating was taking a long time, and she was like, bloop, bloop. And I was like, oh my God. So, and I'm like, ladies, we've seen this show. That lets you know that it's so prevalent that they put it in a show that children pick up what their parents do.
Mm-hmm.
Knowingly or unknowingly, it happens.
Yeah.
So I said, and I feel like I'm not going to feel guilty or anything like that for what's happened. I'm just pointing it out to you and letting you know, like, hey, I'm not the same person. I am actually shifting the energy in this house so that you guys will have a different example to pull from, to where you can say, not only can my mother shift how she is showing up in the world, I can too. And then they can build that muscle at an earlier age.
Yeah.
And that is what we get to do, to where they don't have to be the Peter Pan fighting the adult Captain Hook.
Mm-hmm.
They can have the tools and resources to where they're good. They don't have to wait till adulthood to then realize, hey, you were much bigger. I remember you being bigger. When they get to adulthood, they get to say, nah, even though you're an adult, I'm an adult. I can fight you, and they can have that power, have that resilience real time.
Yeah. And sometimes that awareness is all it takes. You pointing it out may have been enough to just kind of install the stop sign in their heads. But there's another thing that you mentioned in there that I thought was so interesting, because it's that perception that when you're overloaded and you have all of these things to worry about, that the fun has to go away.
It doesn't have to, but we choose for it to.
But we choose to it because we think that it's not important.
Yeah.
But boy, I'll tell you, when we lose the fun, because it's not just the fun, it's the play, and the play is what gives us the resilience and the ability to keep ourselves from landing in that judgmental, perfect space all the time. Mm-hmm. And if that goes away, then it's much more likely that we're going to be more harsh with ourselves, which means we're going to be more harsh with everybody else because we're going to suddenly be seeing all the flaws and all of the things that aren't perfect. And that always comes with more judgment. And when we judge ourselves more harshly, we judge everybody else more harshly too. So, the idea that fun and play are optional is not actually grounded in reality. It's grounded in a false perception.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally the basis of the Make Bad Art course that I teach. And that is like the biggest thing that comes out of it is a better relationship with yourself, because your inner critic learns how to shut up and let you go do what you want to do. And your relationships improve with yourself, with other people. And you just start having more fun as a matter of course.
Right.
Because you're not being so hard on yourself all the time. So your relationships with your kids you're just much more easygoing. You can listen better. It's a laundry list. It's a great laundry list, but it makes everything better. So if you think that you have to let the fun and the play out of your life because all of these other things are more important, I really encourage you to consider the possibility that the fun and the play make all of those other things easier to handle.
Amen, sister. Like I'm over here just like about to bust. Because when I love connecting the dots was also one of my favorite things to do in the little books that we would get when we were like the highlights and all of that. I loved connect the dots and find the object in those pictures. So when you were talking about play and the building of resilience and things like that, it made me think of comedy because comedians take some serious heavy shit and make you laugh.
Yes.
Okay. And by taking the pain, those heavy emotions, it's like it lifts it off, and it's like it's a universal theme that people can just laugh at.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're laughing at it, you're like shaking all of the tension out of your body. And as you're shaking that tension out of your body, then your brain actually becomes clearer.
Mm-hmm.
And then with your brain becoming clearer, that's where the possibilities exist, because you've released energy that out of your body that does not help you.
Yeah.
And right along, so that energy is like the judgment that you were talking about, that inner critic of self and then others. And with play, it's indirect lesson building.
Yes.
Because you can sit down, color, watch a show, knit, play a board game, all of those things in the name of fun. Play basketball outside, go skating. And every single one of those things has a lesson in it.
Mm-hmm.
But you're having fun while you do it. And for example, there was one day I was like, oh, I need to get outside and walk more. So I'm going for a walk, and then I'm noticing that I'm looking down at the sidewalk. And then I was like, wait a minute. This is a beautiful day. The sun is out. There are wispy clouds. There's birds in the sky. Why am I looking down, limiting myself when I can look up and be able to see a vast expanse of trees and birds and nature around me and a sky that goes up higher than my head, rather than looking down and being so stuck in what's immediate. So that was a lesson in so many things. But for me, it's like, how am I present to the possibilities, which is looking up at the sky and seeing everything that's there? Or am I stuck and limiting myself by just looking at a ground that goes for a distance and has has turns and ups and downs? Whereas if I were to look up in the sky, I can see further
Mm-hmm.
and think so much better
Yeah.
and see all the variety.
It's amazing how we do that and we don't even realize it most of the time.
No, but just getting out of the four walls, because, and working from home and things like that, you feel stuck,
Mm-hmm.
And then you're just like, wait a minute, I was habituated to being inside because of a pandemic. Now I can go outside, but I'm not going outside, but I really want to go outside. And that's how easily we can be conditioned to where we're like, oh, wait a minute. Why? How long have I been here? Because it became normal.
Yes.
It became normal. And so we get to force ourselves out.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Mm-hmm. So, this has just been like so much fun, Nancy, and I don't want it to end.
I know. I was just thinking this is probably a good place to stop. And yet I feel like we could keep going for a while. But we are about at an hour, so it probably is the right place to call it done.
Yes. So, and as we call it done, I just thank you for this possibility, this conversation to explore the possibility through creativity. Because in starting with that question, I had a perception of how creativity was in my life, and was like, oh, my dad's just so strict. But he put art in a particular place, right? Because as an African-American male, he wanted to set his children up for success.
Mm-hmm.
And what he knew was, you've got to have one of those degrees. And for him, it was like, you can be a doctor or a lawyer, because those are the positions that get respect.
Yeah.
And I see his heart in what he was doing, and his intent. It didn't land the way he meant it to.
Yeah.
And but I get to take the lessons that did land,
yes,
and learn from the ones that didn't, and be able to continue to escape into my coloring book, escape into movies, and find the lessons that he taught me how to find in things in an indirect and playful way. And he was a funny man. He had a sense of humor as well. So, and I love comedy. I love just being able to think. And I thank both of my parents for that. And I thank my mom for me being able to use and recognize the Bible as a sacred text, yet also a book that has lessons in it.
Well, and that's a great legacy from both of them. And I really appreciate you coming and sharing it with us today. There's so much rich stuff in this conversation, and I hope people will really take a lot from it.
Thank you, Nancy.
That's our show for this week. Thanks so much to Elle Jaye and to you. Elle's links are in the show notes. I hope you'll leave a review for this episode. There's a link in your podcast app, and it is super easy and really makes a difference. If you enjoyed our conversation, please do share it with a friend. Thanks so much. If this episode resonated with you, or if you're feeling a little bit less than confident in your creative process right now, join me at The Spark on Substack as we form a community that supports and celebrates each other's creative courage. It's free, and it's also where I'll be adding programs for subscribers and listeners. The link is in your podcast app, so sign up today. See you there, and see you next week. Follow Your Curiosity is produced by me, Nancy Norbeck, with music by Joseph McDade. If you like Follow Your Curiosity, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends. It really helps me reach new listeners.